Hello and welcome to your 12th tutorial on CSS. Today we'll be talking about Grid. Grid is the most powerful layout system available in CSS. It is a two-dimensional system, meaning it can handle both columns and rows. And so for today, as you can see, I have a different layout. We're going to be using WebStorm, which is just like Notepad. And you can go ahead and download it using Google. It's free. And so the first thing that I've done is I've made a div, so the parent div, and the class is grid container, and in it I've given it two more divs with lorem ipsum. So the first one is 80 words and the second one is 30-ish. And so lorem ipsum is basically dummy text if you're not familiar with it. And so to continue, please go ahead and write this for yourself. And now let's give it some CSS code in our internal style sheet. So we're going to be typing dot grid container, so our class grid container. When we write grid container, let's add in an angle bracket and div. So this will be applied to the divs. And now let's give it a background color, and let's give it the value EEE. And let's also give it padding of 0.5 em, so ems. And so when we save, we get something like this. So our two divs in this box, which is sort of a light gray color. And let's move on, and let's also make another grid container selector with the nth child. So we're going to type in grid container and angle bracket div nth child and odd, so the value is odd. And let's open our curly braces, and inside let's give it background color, and let's make it, let's say CCC. And when we save, so we get now two boxes. So this is our main div, and the bottom one is the child div, so it goes in an odd order. Nothing in my code has anything to do with grid yet, so we have to add in, just after style, let's add in grid container, and let's give it the property display. We've learned about this, and its value is going to be grid. And let's add in grid template columns, and let's give it the value 70% and 30%. And so when we save, we get them right next to each other with 70% in the first one and 30 in our second div. We can give grid template columns as many values though as we'd like, so I can change this to 40, and I can also add in another 30. And when we save, we get something like this. And so if we want to see it better, let's duplicate our divs. So let's copy this, paste it here. So now we have 4. And when I save, you can see that my first box is now 40%, second one is 30, and so is the third one. However, the fourth one gets moved down to the bottom, and it is also 40%. They're also responsive. Grid is responsive, as you can see right here. Works perfectly fine with any devices. And let's move on, and let's change it back to 70 and 30. And so let's say we want to add in some spaces right here, so gaps. What we're going to do is we're going to add in grid column gap. So right here, we're going to type in grid column gap, which is going to be 1 em, so only a tiny space. Save, and as you can see, we get this gap right here, just in between our two divs, or 4 divs in this case. And we can also do the same thing horizontally, so I can type in grid row gap, also 1 em. And when we save, we get this gap right here horizontally, so we have vertical and horizontal both. And there's also a way of doing this without having to type in two different properties and values. So what we need to do is we need to type in grid gap. So this is for both horizontal and vertical. 1 EM. And we get the same result. Let's go ahead and create a brand new HTML file. So click on File, New HTML file, and name it whatever you like. I already have one, so its name is index12.html. And basically what I've done in it is I've just copied everything from here and pasted it in this file. And so let's go ahead and delete these divs, and let's make div lorem 4, so only 4 words. I can just copy this just to make it quick, just like this. And let's also make our structure nice and neat. And so after getting our structure, make div lorem ipsum dolocit, so only 4 words, just small text. And let's duplicate this 3 more times. So now we have 4 divs in our parent div, and let's go up into grid container, and let's delete everything except display grid. And so we now have no grid functionality just yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in grid template columns, and we're going to give it the value 1fr, 1fr, 1fr. So fr is basically fraction, so it's fractions of our page. And now let's get this back up, and as you can see, my page is now divided into 3 sections, 1, 2 and 3. So 3 parts, and the 4th one just gets moved down back to the first part of my page. I can also change the values, so the 1 to 2 and the middle part will now be split into 2. So this is 1, 2 and 1. So imagine if this was split into 2, it would also be 1. So now my page is split into 4 sections if you actually count. And what we can also do is just get rid of these values, and we can type in repeat, and in our brackets we can write 4, so it will be split into 4 sections. The first one will be 1fr, second will be 2fr, and this will be repeated. So when we save, as you can see, my page is now split up into 1, 2, 1 and 2, so it's actually 6. So it's like 6 slots basically. And next, let's just change this to, let's say 3, 1fr, and then let's save and refresh. So 3 parts, all of them 1fr, that's what it means basically. And then let's add grid gap 1 em, so just small grid gap, just like this. And then let's also add in grid auto rows, and let's make it 100 pixels when we save. And let's say we were to add more lorem ipsum to this, so let's say to the second div we add like a 50 worded lorem ipsum, and when we save, you can see that it automatically gets bigger, so my row gets bigger, and this is because of grid auto rows. It automatically basically moves with your text. And as you can see, the 4th one still has its small 100 pixel size. We can change 100 pixels to min, max, 100 pixels and auto. And so as we can see, the top 3 divs get bigger, however the 4th one doesn't. And now let's go back into our body section. Let's make this, let's duplicate this 4 more times, just so we have 8 now, just like this. And so when I save, we now have this many divs, and as we can see, most of them get our 100 pixel sized box, so the minimum. And so to move on, in our first div, which is this, let's get rid of lorem ipsum, and let's make class nested. So this is going to be a nested way of grid, and we have now too many. And so when we make it nested, let's make 3 more divs, and let's write lorem, just tiny text, make it 3, and let's close this. So make something like this, and let's give it some properties using our CSS code. So let's type in dot nested, and inside let's type in display grid, And let's add in grid template columns, and its values is going to be repeat 3 1FR, just like we did before. And let's get rid of this. And it's also adding grid auto rows, and the value is going to be 50 pixels. And lastly, adding grid gap. Now when we save, we have nothing just yet. And so what we're gonna do is we're going to type in .nested, and we're gonna apply it to our div. So type in div, and let's give it border just so we can see it, 333 for example, 1px, and solid. And let's add in a couple more divs just like this. So now when we save, as you can see right here, we now have borders around our lorem. They have gaps in between them, and so everything that we applied right here has been applied to our web page. Now we can just comment on anything that we don't need. So I don't need this right now, like this. And we also don't need our nested properties. And when we've commented on everything, let's go back up into our first grid container. Let's go to our divs, and let's delete everything as we don't need them right now, besides our very first div, which is our class grid container. And inside of it, so we're going to make 4 more divs inside of our first parent div, and we're going to give it class block 1, and let's give it also text with the same class, and duplicate it 4 times, change the numbers into the right order, do the same thing in the class section as well so we know which is which, and we can give them different properties. And let's go back up here, and let's start off with inserting display grid, same as last time. Let's add in grid template columns, and let's give them values which are 1FR, 2FR, and 1FR. This is 4, 1FR, 2FR, 1FR, which is basically 4 sections. And let's also add in grid auto rows, and the value will be min max, 100 pixels, and auto. And let's add in grid gap as well, 1 EM. And let's add in something new, which is justify items. So this is sort of like the position, and let's set it to start, just to start off. And so when we save, we get something like this, grid gap 1 EM. And let's also add in justify, which is something new for us, justify items, and let's set it to start. Now when we save, we get something that looks like this. And let's also add in grid auto rows as well, and the values will be min max, 100 pixels, auto. So now it should look. And our template columns, 1FR, 2FR, 1FR. Now let's save. Value neyse to jinji. And now, so when we save and refresh, we get something like this. We can change our justify items value to center. It will start at the center. And we can also change it to end, which will be at the end of our page, just like this, and its default value is stretch, so it stretches it out from the right, so more space. And let's also add in another property, which is align item, so it will align our items. It's self-explanatory basically. And let's type in start, and for align items the default is also stretch. So after we add in grid gap, justify item stretch, and align item stretch, we get something that looks a little like this. And to move on, let's give our blocks their CSS properties. So let's start off with block 1, so that is block 1. And inside, let's give it align self, which will be center, so it will be aligned to the center. Let's copy this, paste it, change with block 2. Let's also add in our other blocks as well. So this is 3, this is 4, this is 2. Let's change align self here to center, and let's change this to start, so it will be in order. Let's give nothing to block 3, and for block 4 let's add in justify self end. Justify self end, just like this. Now when we save, we get something that looks like this. And block 3 is like this, as we haven't given it anything, and in our grid container selector we have justify items and align items set to stretch. So I can change this to start. So I can set align items to start, and we'll get something that looks like this. Now let's just comment on our blocks. And to start off, let's go back to block 1. So bring this down here. And for block 1, let's type in grid column. And 1/3, so 1 1/3. So it's like a fraction. And let's change align items to stretch, just like this. Get rid of align self over here, as we don't need it. And now when we save, as you can see, it turned into 1/3 of our page. So this is using 1/3 of our page, 3 points basically, so 1 2 and 3. And we can also add in grid row, same thing, just the other way, 1/3. And now when we save, you can see that it now goes both ways, so horizontally and vertically, so 3 points from each. And so working with grids is easier than with flex boxes if you're familiar with them. And let's continue, and for block 2 let's add in both grid column and grid row. So we can copy this, bring this comment down here, delete this, paste this. However, let's change the values. So for the first one, let's just make it 3 for grid column, and for grid row, let's also type in 3. So this is block 2. It will be moved down to 3 points down and 3 points from the left, so both horizontally and vertically 3 points. That's why it's now down here. However, if we change the 3 to a minus 1/3, so for block 2, let's make it 3 and 1/3. And now let's move on to block 3. For block 3, let's add in something like grid column, so the same things. And let's change the values to 1 and 2/4, so it's self-explanatory, just like always. 2/4 of the page. As you can see, it's sort of now merged with block 1. However, if we add in borders, we could see that it's actually like this. And so 2 to 4, so this is 2 to 4. And then lastly, let's add in something for block 4. So let's type in grid column 1, so let's give grid column 1 and grid row 2/4. Now when I save, you can see that it now covers block 3. So block 3 was actually behind this, if you remember. And to see this better, we can add in, and just to have a better understanding of this, let's type in dot block 1 and let's put a border here, 1 pixel, solid black. This is what we get. So as you can see, block 4 is now on top of block 3, and it is sort of merged into block 1, and block 1 is using 3 points, and block 2 is using also 3 points and a 1/3 height. And yeah, so that was all that I had prepared for today. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.